So hello again, Bobby Srivastav, co-founder, COO at Benekiva, and I'll be your moderator for this panel. So as you've probably heard, we eat, sleep, and breathe claims at Benekiva. And I'll start by sharing that transformation in our industry gets used, the word gets used quite a bit. Even our session title is Claims Transformation as an example. And there's so many in the industry that gets thrown around, whether it's the end-to-end journey strategy or integrating technology. I've shared this in the past and even written about the best definition that I've come across from a philosopher, Sadhguru, who's written about transformation. So when we say transformation, it means nothing of the old has remained. Something totally new has flowered within you. Now you look at a rose plant that is full of thorns. Springtime came and rose flowers burst out. It is transformation. The thorns are still there, and there are many thorns than flowers. But we don't call it a thorn plant. We call it a rose plant because of that single rose. So everyone's attention goes towards that single rose than 100 thorns that are on the plant, isn't it? So all the thorns in you, maybe you cannot remove them right now, but if one rose flower blossoms, everyone is willing to overlook those things. So Sadhguru was talking about transformation of oneself. And I would share when we look at claims transformation, I really feel the same way. You know, we're looking at that rose, that claimant experience, and it becomes a beautiful thing when we start to focus on that. So what we're going to be doing today is diving into the why and the strategies that are being executed amongst our partner organizations, among carriers. So what I would like to do is start off with Steve first, and let's do a quick introduction, and then we'll go right to the meat of the content.
All right, Steve Schaefer, President and CEO of Homesteaders Life Company. We're a 116-year-old mutual company, as Brent was talking about, a long-standing organization that had a very low appetite for change and innovation when I joined 8 years ago, but with a team that was really open to setting a goal of transforming our internal systems to digitize our workflows. So we had a big goal to do that, and then we encountered Benekiva and saw that as a key part of helping us to make that happen.
I didn't pay him for that, by the way.
Sarika?
Hi, my name is Sarika Gupta. I'm the Senior Vice President and Head of Insurance Market Growth at EXL. Some of you may know EXL is focused on enabling insurance businesses to become data-led. At EXL, we fundamentally believe that data combined with the business knowledge and AI capabilities will be key to transforming the operations. And that's what we are focusing on delivering. I think today when we talk about some of these, I have the privilege of partnering with a lot of carriers in the industry in terms of how they are thinking about claims transformation. And I think would look forward to sharing some of those insights in this discussion today. Lisa?
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Parker, and I'm the Vice President of our Policy Benefits Department, where we administer all risk product claims for Northwestern Mutual. Northwestern Mutual has been serving our policy owners for slightly over 160 years. But it's really, really important as we think about our policy owners and the trust they placed in us, how we deliver at time of claim, where it's the moment of truth. I'm excited to talk with you about that today and how we're solving for that at Northwestern Mutual.
Hey everyone, Brent Williams again.
So Lisa, I'll start the question with you. So as a head of claims for Northwestern Mutual, you know firsthand the impact of the hassle factor is to the customer. So would you share the strategic importance of the need for a distinctive claim experience?
Yes, I'm happy to. So when you think about a distinctive claim experience, really it must start with the relationship that we have formed with our policy owners and ultimately which we choose to form with their beneficiaries. Like I said earlier, we've been in business for over 160 years, and that doesn't come by chance. That comes from consistently doing the right thing, ensuring that what we say is what we do and how we act and how we treat our policy owners, and make sure that everything is in their best interest. So when you think about the claims experience, and the hassle or the friction that people sometimes feel with that experience, what that can do is that can erode at the trust that the companies worked so hard for years to establish. Think about it, when those policies are issued to protect their, for an individual to protect their family and their legacy, it's with the intent of decades into the future. So when the time comes to pay the claim, it's important that there are not nuisances in the process. There are not tedious requirements and delays and hiccups that a beneficiary experiences at such a vulnerable time in their life. So really, when you think about strategy and the importance for a company, it comes full circle. We are there delivering on that promise in a way that, with a claims process itself, is almost invisible, and it's more about the experience and the relationship that we're forming with that beneficiary in hopes to support their needs in the future.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. So Brent, prior to Benekiva, you had a successful practice, and having that book of business of 300 million assets under management is really no joke. So what, from your experience, caused you to really do, we talk about when we started Benekiva, prior to writing one single line of code, we did a lot of research. So what caused you to do that research and ultimately, create Benekiva?
Yeah, it was a couple personal stories. I often talk about, when I was an advisor, I used to talk about the why. Why are we an advisor? And I used to mentor lots of advisors, and I always used to tell this story that, I had a personal scenario where I sold a simple $1 million term policy. And back then, when I sold it, they had this accelerated death benefit of 60%. Now the new life policies are a lot more, but they had this accelerated death benefit of 60%. And that was deemed to be used when a person was terminally ill. And I had a scenario, a gal named Judy, call me 3 years to the day after she purchased this $1 million policy and shared with me that she was terminally ill. And we decided to go through the claims process because she had the proper identification that she was terminally ill. And she received $600,000 of a $1 million policy. The other $400,000 would be paid upon her death to her beneficiaries. What was interesting was she took this $600,000, she went to a cancer rehabilitation center down in Texas, and today, Judy is still here. That is why we do what we do. That is why we sell these types of policies. So then we took a step further and said, okay, why is the claims process such a tedious process? Why is the claims process such a document-ridden process? Everything, think about it. You literally buy everything you need for your home with a click of a button on your mobile phone that's sitting in your lap right now. Why can't we have that same experience in the claims process? So that's really what started us down this path of solving this claims experience issue.
So moving on to Steve. So as the president and CEO of Homesteaders Life Insurance, which is known for its premier pre-need funeral funding, you have really committed to digital automation of claims and servicing operations to move your company to the 21st century. What was the need for Homesteaders to invest in claims technology, and how has that helped you in the last few years?
As I mentioned earlier, we had made a commitment as an organization to digital transformation, but it helps to understand our business model. We are a monoline company, and all we sell is pre-need. Each pre-need insurance policy is attached to a funeral that's already been planned, and the value proposition that helps us sell our policies is our partnership with the funeral home, so that when a death occurs, we pay claims within 24 to 48 hours. So for us, claims really is our differentiator in the marketplace, being able to pay the funeral home on behalf of the family so that it's seamless, so that when the death occurs, the family doesn't have to worry about anything financially related to the funeral. And the funeral home, in turn, guarantees that price. So for us, it was critical to our business model, and part of how we built our value brand in our space was how quickly we paid claims. The problem we faced was that the processes we used to do that were pretty archaic and pretty prone to breakage as we changed other pieces of our systems and models over time. So anytime we changed something in the policy admin system, our claims process would break. So we were looking for a better solution that was more flexible, that would allow us to really facilitate a better experience for our funeral home partners and a better experience for the families. And so that's how we, spent some time focusing on how are we going to fix our claims process. And at the time we were looking, there was really no solution in the marketplace. So we encountered Brent, Sovin, and Bobby when they were just coming out of the gate, and we were one of the first companies to say, yeah, we're in. If we can fix this problem for us, we know that it's going to be a problem that will impact the rest of the profession. What we hadn't contemplated at the time, and what's been really interesting to watch, is how much other carriers have started to focus on the customer experience. And it only makes sense, right? Because in every other aspect of society, there are companies who are focusing exclusively on that customer experience. Now it is so important for us to not just focus on how to drive that next sale through the front end of the funnel, but how to make sure that those customers are taken care of. And like Lisa said, the point of truth for all of us as carriers is when we pay that claim. That's why people buy insurance policies. That's when they need the money. They need it quickly. They need it smoothly. I went through a process with my father when he passed away a couple of years ago. Large insurance company. Took me 90 days to get the insurance claims paid. And I knew what I was doing. And it just makes no sense that it's so paper-driven, and everything else in society we can streamline, but for some reason this has been a real challenge. So for us, it was a competitive advantage. It also helped us, as an organization, commit to more innovation and start to move our culture down a path to say that we could tackle bigger problems and take on bigger projects. For a mutual company that hadn't experienced a lot of change, it was a place where we felt there was enough motivation, because it was critical for our future to make this happen, but it was also a place where our teams could get their head around jumping into this, because it impacted the company a lot, it impacted our customers a lot, and it really spoke to the value proposition that we were offering.
Thanks. It's so important. It's been very interesting to see how organizations are really looking at claims as a competitive advantage. It truly is, if you think about it from a retention lens. So with that, Sarika, prior to pandemic, organizations were looking to innovate claims. We came across a statistic that 72% of carriers are making a strategic goal to innovate claims in the next 5 years. So can you share what EXL's experience has been to execute on claims innovation?
Yeah, so I think, look, as you've heard again and again, I think from everyone, that claim experience is one which is the true moment of truth between a carrier and the policyholder, right? So it's been on the forefront of the focus for transformation, as it rightfully should be. However, I think during COVID, this entire transformation, two things happened, basically. One, the carriers, potentially every carrier saw a sudden spike in volume, almost to the tune of 30 to 40%. And that resulted into need to do something, right? And also the appetite for the consumer to take on some of the transformation initiatives, the adoption for transformation initiatives went up significantly. However, I think during COVID, what happened is, instead of a strategic roadmap to fundamentally transforming claims, what started to happen is more initiatives around what could help solve the immediate problem of capacity and the customer dissatisfaction, right? So a lot of interim solutions got implemented. Now, some of those interim solutions will only result in short-term value. However, a lot of them can also result into longer-term value. So I think a good momentum got created during COVID. However, the real potential of a claims organization, as we heard Brent talk about it, Lisa talk about it, is really enhancing the customer, the claims experience and customer differently to create an expense into a revenue stream, right? So those are the possibilities. And I think the real transformation of fundamentally reimagining the claims operating model is still very under-tapped in the market. I think it's very high on the agenda for almost every carrier. I think next 2 or 3 years we'll see a significant change, but it's still largely untapped today. And I think every carrier that I connect with and I speak with, it's very high on their agenda. So hopefully in next few years, this will be an area which will fundamentally reimagine the operating model.
So Lisa, when we speak about the customer journey, picking on customer journey now, and its impact on customer service, can you share how is Northwestern Mutual and your organization executing on that vision?
Sure. I think what it comes down to is if you think about the insurance industry, it's highly regulated, it's driven by contractual agreements, it's been a paper process from its inception. And we're really starting to turn that inside out and say, we got to start from the customer's point of view, the policy owner, the beneficiary, and understand where they're at in their journey, and making sure that that process, although it's still regulated and requires us to follow a certain protocol, is really becoming more transparent. That's our goal, is to put it behind the scenes and bring front and center the experience forward that beneficiary, that policy owner needs from us in that moment, to make the short-term decisions, to take the actions that are important and necessary to execute on their daily decisions, but more importantly, that they feel that they have a partner for their future. Because when people come into large sums of money, it's not a good idea to emotionally react and make decisions with that money. Statistics show that people usually spend on average, their inheritance in less than 5 years. That's not what their loved ones had intended for them when they set out with that insurance protection for them, that policy. So we need to make sure that the customer journey is really meeting that needs of that next generation and their financial security and their planning. To do that, it can't be a process, claim, task-driven experience. It really needs to be getting back to the basics of the needs of that individual, what they faced at that time of loss, and how, as a company, we give them the confidence to be able to handle each day at a time, knowing that we're there long-term to advise them and help them, just as we did their loved ones, that we're trying to protect their financial security. So we need to make sure that our technology, our platforms are all supporting that they're not focused on the process, they're not focused on the paperwork, they're focused on how do we make everything easy. So I think there's a lot of disbelief in that the customer journey should be automated. In claims, we believe it's a human-centered experience. Think about it. If any of you have went through a loss or experienced a disability claim, you know that you feel a sense of confidence when you can talk to another human being and they can be there to support you, answer your questions, and you know there's somebody there that can help you navigate whatever technology or solution that's being used in the background. So that's what we believe the customer journey is all about, and technology needs to enable it, not replace the human experience.
So Brent, what would you describe as the biggest differentiator in the claim process as we worked across 18 plus carriers?
Yeah, I think Lisa said it very well. There's this whole talk in the industry about, rules, roles, data-driven, automation. And while there are certain claims processes that you can certainly engage that theory or methodology, but there are other claims processes that you simply don't want to automate the entire process. So when we talk about automating certain processes in the claims experience, it was interesting. We were talking about this at breakfast. It was one of the things that we got wrong in the research. So we got two things wrong in the research. One of them was we felt that claims staff would actually look at our platform as a job replacement platform, as a headcount reduction platform. And what was interesting, and we prepared to, basically sell around that. And what we learned was once the carrier's claim staff started using the platform and leveraging the platform, all of a sudden it took all those tasks that were basically just tasks in their day off of their plate. So now they can focus on spending that extra human touch during these other claims processes. So that was the one piece of research we got wrong, where we felt claims staff would actually kind of push our platform away, and it was actually the opposite. The claims staff actually embraced the platform because it freed up their day to where now they can spend an extra 5 minutes on the phone with a beneficiary going through the grieving process while filling out, a certain requirement. They can spend the extra time and give that, extra support when a person is on the call and starts breaking out crying because they're going through this process of filing a claim or processing a claim while also grieving the death of a loved one. Or they're in the hospital on a disability wondering, how am I going to pay my bills? Those things. So I think it's important that we've never said from day one that we will automate 100% of claims from intake to payout and everything in between, but there are claims that you certainly can do that. And that's where we would collaborate with a carrier client and partner with them and say, what experience do you want to provide, right? This isn't our experience. This is what experience do you want to provide? What parts of the experience do you want to have the human element? What parts of this experience can you just automate and get it off the claims staff plate so they can spend more time on the human element items? And I think that's the biggest differentiator.
Oh, thank you, Brent. So, Steve, this is a great question. And how important do you think is the role of change management as we're doing system implementation?
Yeah, as I mentioned, our organization was not very change ready when I joined. We've gone through a lot of change over the past 8 years, in good ways, preparing the company for the future, digitizing those sorts of things. And so one of the things I learned early on in our organization, particularly just given the culture that we had, was that change management was critically important. So as a leader, myself as CEO, and then those folks who were leading the projects, they had to own the change management aspect of it because a couple people have alluded to it, Brent particularly. When you talk about adding a claim system or any other major system implementation, we've done a couple. We're just doing finishing an agency management system implementation right now as well. So people have to understand that, one, it's not job threatening, because the first thing everybody wants to know is, what's this going to mean for me? Am I going to lose my job? If this project fails and I'm part of the team, am I going to lose my job? I mean, those are the things that jump to the front of anybody's mind. If I say I'm going to pick this vendor, or I'm going to start this project, or I want to tackle this big initiative, and it doesn't go well, what's it going to mean for me? Also then, if it goes well, are we going to reduce headcount? If I'm head of claims, am I going to have 5 less people that work in my area? And what does that mean for me as a leader in the company? All those things go through people's minds, and we like to think that it wouldn't, but it does. So as a leader in the organization, for me as CEO, for other people, you have to make sure everybody's comfortable, but that the point of these initiatives are to make sure that the company's strong well into the future, and that we're built for success from this point forward. And if you don't do anything, you're going to end up being irrelevant, and that will cost people their jobs. So for us internally, having people who are communicating that regularly to the people on the front lines, to the leadership teams, to the people who are stakeholders in the organization, to the board, making sure they understand we're committed to this digital transformation, and not everything is going to be a smooth path. So, these are some big initiatives for all companies, right? So when you're doing a system implementation, they rarely ever go 100% smoothly all the way through, come in under budget and well ahead of schedule, right? That's the way it works. Reality crashes in. So as leaders in the organization, it's important that from the top to the bottom, everybody's committed to this, and that you stay focused on being persistent in finishing it out, because that's where the real benefits happen. And it takes a lot of change management orientation to do that. And if you don't have that built into your plan. If you could think you can just have a tactical plan that says, we're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you leave out the change management part, you're much more likely to fail. I'm not saying you're guaranteed to fail, but it's much more highly likely to fail or stumble, and the teams are going to get disenchanted along the way, because as they hit those rough spots where they have to work through something and it doesn't go as well as planned, they need to know that the people upstream in the organization and the people on the front lines are, supportive of the primary goal to go after it.
So speaking of things that may go wrong, Sarika, can you share an example of when you've seen a transformation gone badly and why?
Yeah, so I think there are some good examples of where transformation has gone bad, and I think there are also some very good examples of where it has gone well. But I think the fundamental principle, as you started saying, Bobby, that look, when you transform, it essentially means that what you've been doing so far needs to fundamentally change, right? And in my experience, what I've seen is where these transformation levers are considered as an opportunity to just automate what you do today, right, and do it faster. That's when the transformation initiatives fail, right? Just to give you an example, we were actually invited to look at a claims organization for a group benefit organization, and they were already on a transformation journey for a few months, and they had implemented a few initiatives. One of the things that they said is that 50% of the calls that they get in their claims organization are really status calls, right? People calling in to check the status of their claims. And what they felt is that if they can solve for this, they can actually eliminate 30 to 40% of the call volume, and then that'll help drive a better customer experience. So what they did was, every time a claim would move from one stage to the other, they actually started sending text and emails, depending on what the customers had opted for, to let them know that where the claims was in the journey, and from their side, they were keeping them informed. However, they didn't see any change in the call volume, right? And in fact, it didn't change the customer experience at all. So when we went in terms of really looking at it, we found that their entire claim cycle, right, there were about 11 touch points in the journey in terms of the information being asked from the customer, the amount of validation being done, and back and forth, right? So imagine the number of friction points. The customers, when they were calling in, they were actually manifesting the pain of the time it takes to adjudicate the claim, right? Not wanting to be informed, but they wanted to get paid, right? And as a result, the initiatives did not yield any value and benefit, right? So it's very important. Any claims transformation, in my view, has to have two very fundamental outcomes that must be achieved. One is, it has to simplify the experience for the customer. It has to make it easy for the customer to engage with you in that process, right? And it's not an easy thing, because every customer is different. Their experience of simplification is very different, right? So I think looking at it from customers' lens and sort of looking at what that simplification means, and also a claims process, when transformed, must pay the claims as fast as possibly can, right? I mean, if the way Steve said, look, 48 hours for a pre-need claim, great. I wish everybody can sort of emulate that model, because that's what a claims transformation should deliver. Anytime that focus on these two outcomes has remained, we've seen success in the transformation initiatives. But anytime when you've sort of moved the needle away and focused on just automating steps in the process, transformation initiatives have failed.
Yeah, thanks, Sarika. I mean, it's so important. We oftentimes talk about being so outcome-based, metric-based, and these are the type of metrics and outcomes that when you start to look at your journeys and start to measure is where you can quickly see points of failure and pivot as you need so that your journey's on track. So Lisa, I love Northwestern Mutual's approach and, how you shared about how to keep the human in the center. So how have you approached that philosophy as you're planning your digitization strategy?
Sure. Well, I'd like to start by saying I can't agree more with what was just said about you can't automate the process you currently have. You really have to look through it through the lens of the client and the beneficiaries and understand what their needs are. And the other thing you need to do is you need to make sure that your claims professional are there, the ones co-creating that future vision with you, because they experience day in and day out the questions, the friction that's experienced for themselves and for their beneficiaries. And, you know, I've worked in claims, I've been in insurance for 30 years, but I've been in claims for about the last 7 years, and there's one thing I know for sure. Most claims professionals who are working in claims, they're doing it because they feel a sense of purpose, a sense of pride, and gratitude, right? To be able to help people who are going through grief, help people who need them. And they want to help create an experience that takes away and reduces some of that, the difficulty people face at time of loss. So what we're doing at Northwestern Mutual is really making sure that we are thinking about the end with both our beneficiaries and our claims professionals in mind, and having them really help us design what that future state looks like. And it will take quite a while to transform. We're a company that has been doing business for a long, long time. We have a lot of legacy systems. So we know we're not going to be able to solve for everything and get to that outcome on day one, but if we know what that outcome should be and it's designed with that human-centered experience, we can iteratively go after different segments of making that experience better, digitally enabling pieces of it, taking burden away from some of the task management that our claims professionals have to deal with day in and day out, so that they have the ability to see the forest through the trees. And that's what we need for our claims professionals, who are there for a reason, who want to be there. So it's really important, I think, that we make sure that we co-create that future, and we're agile enough to recognize when things change along the way and pivot and shift with the voice of our beneficiaries and our policy owners.
Lisa, I mean, I've, throughout our Benekiva journey, I've spent time talking to over 400 claims professionals, and I do see that sense of pride, that sense of purpose, and it's just eliminating the friction points and really making it about, the human. Yes. So thank you for sharing that.
And they really want to do that. You had mentioned the research showing that they were afraid that their jobs. I haven't talked to one claims professional in my career at Northwestern or outside of Northwestern who really sees it that way. They're hungry, they're thirsty for innovation, they want it because they know that there's so much more they could be doing to serve their clients and beneficiaries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with the point about them very passionate people, because when we started down this journey, like I mentioned, we visited multiple carriers and sat with multiple claim staff. And there's this disbelief belief in the industry from policyholders that carriers simply don't want to pay claims. That's why the process is so bad. They don't want to pay claims. And what I found was that that's completely 100% not true. These people are very passionate about paying claims. However, they want to pay the right claims to the right people, period. And that's why we needed to make sure that we enable that process.
Yeah, so Brent, when we talk about our platform being low code, no code, how is that shaping, how are we working with carriers when they're in that long transformation journey?
Yeah, I think it's, there's the whole notion in the industry that, the platforms are going to shift to this low code, no code scenario. And, when we set out to build Benekiva, remember we said there were two main things: anywhere, anytime, any device for all parties involved, and no custom code. Now, those two things are very difficult to achieve. And, when we set that as our North Star and build everything backwards, now we can make a truly configurable system. And I get it. I've talked to hundreds of carriers. As soon as they hear configurable, they think that means more custom code around your configuration layer, right? And so when we are in the marketplace and, carriers will ask, okay, of your 19 carriers, or however many carriers you're working with, how many of them have custom code? 0. There is no custom code. That is what we need to strive for, because that is a truly configurable system to configure the experience for the product, the people, and all parties involved.
So Steve, what is next for Homesteaders' claims journey as you're looking at your transformation roadmap? And I know as an innovative executive, what we would love to know what will be your focus for the next 18 to 36 months.
Yeah, as I said, we've been on this digital transformation journey, and so on the claim side, we've been able to modify our internal processes and the staff using the system on the claim side. Our goal is to push that capability out to our funeral home partners and ultimately to the consumer on the customer service side. Really, for us, the claim initiation happens from the funeral home because they get the death call. So they're on the front lines, when the death happens, they're in the home, taking care of the family. So for us, being able to give them the ability to pull up an app on their phone and file a claim and know that that part's taken care of. They know how much is available to the family knows it's going to be paid for. Everybody kind of at least calms down about those issues at that time, and then they can focus on what's really important, which is, celebrating the life, taking care of each other, that sort of thing. So that's kind of next immediate thing on our claims journey, but we're also looking to now leverage some of the same technology now that the bridges have been built into our policy admin system, which we use LifePro, which has been a great system for us. It works perfectly for what we need. But now that we've built the bridges, expanding that on the customer service side to make sure that address changes and beneficiary changes and those sorts of things, which have always had to be facilitated through a phone call to our staff manned phones, which people like because they can talk to a person, but how much better if they can pull up their phone and change it themselves and they don't have to make a call and go through the switchboard and try and connect with somebody. So those are kind of the next phases for us in leveraging technology to improve the consumer experience. And beyond that, we have several other plans on the roadmap, but one of those is to what Brent spoke to earlier, turning around for family and friends who have just benefited from the fact that their parents took the initiative to plan and fund their funeral to benefit their family and change that whole experience for them. Take that element and turn around and turn that into new sales. So that's kind of next stage after we get through some of the customer servicing side for us, is to really start to leverage that customer retention, customer engagement, new sale aspect off of this new improved claims process.
So Sarika, from the carriers that you guys, that your organization services, what are the carriers sharing with you are the next 18 to 36 month roadmap?
Yeah, so I think very similar to what Steve said, right? I think the individual strategies that carriers may follow will depend on where they are in the journey. But I think broadly, three focus areas for carriers is what we are seeing and what we are hearing. One is, I think, first and foremost, to really create an end-to-end omni-channel experience for the claims organization, right? And we've heard it multiple times, meet the customer right where the customer wants it and how they want it, right? And that's just not for the external customers, but for your internal customers as well, the employees or the claims rep that you have. So truly end-to-end claim experience, and I think that'll involve a lot of technology changes, really bringing in new digital capabilities to drive that experience. Second thing is, I think, at least 60 to 70% of the claims journey to be straight through, right? And really drive that, true customer experience by leveraging data analytics and sort of enhancing the AI capabilities to influence the same system. So I think that's the second thing. And third thing is really, I think, truly focusing on data analytics to not only change the claims experience or the claims adjudication experience, but really change the service model, right? Things like next best action, how do you actually prepare that from a claim service model and use that to what Steve was also alluding and Brent talked about. When you do that, you can actually create the capabilities to start engaging with beneficiaries and start sort of bringing them back into the ecosystem, so turning expense into claims. So I think those are the three big objectives in the next 18 to 36 months that we see carriers focusing on, and depending on where they are on the journey.
So we're almost about out of time. So I'm going to ask, starting with Steve, what is one big piece of feedback that you would give to a carrier as they're starting to look at claims?
Yeah, I'll try and make it quick since we're close on time. I think as leaders, we have to take ownership of making this happen because consumers expect a different experience. They're getting it everywhere else with every other purchase they make. And the fact that we, as the insurance industry or profession, whatever you want to call it, are leaving them behind is a failure on our part to make the investment, to make their experience better. At our heart, we are here to serve our customers in a very important way. And so for me, it's just a mandate that we as an organization develop those tools, because if we don't, somebody else will, and they will be serving the families that we used to serve, meeting the needs that we used to meet through our products and services. And that would be a shame, because we have the ability, we have the commitment, we have the, the organizations with the kind of values and mission to do this and do it right. But as leaders, we have to make the commitment to make the investment and also leave behind the fear, or manage the fear and manage the risk of making these big changes and doing it in the right way and staying committed to it for the right reason, which is our customer base. And sometimes it's hard because it takes resources and time, and we all have limited amounts of those, right? But as an organization, for us and our small company, we're investing significantly across a variety of fronts, but this is one area that we're committed to, making the evolution now, but we know that we're going to have to continue that evolution as the consumer's expectations change.
Thank you. Sarika?
Yeah, I think if there's just one, feedback is really, I think the carriers need to simply focus on simplifying their claims operating model, right? The processes are very complex. They don't need to be that complex, right? And then I think people who have dealt in claims in this room will agree that they're still plagued with processes which require 12 weeks to just simply train and so on. I mean, that type of complexity is just not sustainable. So I think the one feedback would be focus on simplifying the claims operating model with the lens of customer, and specifically so before bringing a new technology in, because if you end up building the same processes on a new technology, you're not going to see value. So really, really focus on simplifying your claims process and operating model first.
Thank you. And I would agree with both the panelists. I would say on top of that, I think it's critically important that we recognize that there's a shift taking place in the workforce. The generational shift that's occurring means that people will just not stay in roles as long as they once did. So they're not going to be satisfied dealing with legacy systems, jobs that don't give them the intellectual challenges that they need, the connection they want to make with clients. So the industry itself, it needs to act now, because otherwise we are going to be faced with a situation where we won't have the talent that will be willing to come and sit in the jobs or stay in the jobs long enough to help deliver on the value for the company and the strategic value that we can bring through claims. I think the other thing we need to think about is the consumer is changing as well. Insurance is viewed by younger generations as, I'm not sure if I want this, I'm not sure of the hassle that I want to deal with, it's too much work. And we're changing that drastically on the front end with our sales model, right? We are digitizing the enrollment, the new purchase journey. We're trying to make take away labs and blood work and make everything simpler on the front end. But if we're not investing on the back end, where the promise is delivered, then we've invested a lot of money to potentially lose clients in the future. So it's really, really critically important that we don't wait too long to recognize that the generational shift is here and it's facing the industry, and we have to seize the opportunity to take and make a digital experience, automate parts of the process to enable the human experience and connection that people want with companies that they plan for long periods of time.
One thing I'd add to that, just on the timing, is that these things take time. So if you wait to start at the point where your customers are starting to leave you because you didn't make these changes, it's too late. we all have to start now. We can't wait until, the consumer has already told us they didn't like what we were doing because they've left us and done something else. That's what happened, with Ubers and taxis and all of that, right? So we've all seen the models and how they work. If we're not going to meet the need of the consumer, they're going to go somewhere else. And if we don't start now, before they start moving, we're at risk. Our whole business model is at risk. So, that's the way we look at it. And we're in a pretty interesting space in that there's not a lot of innovation in funeral service, and there's not a lot of innovation, impacting us right now in pre-need insurance, but we want to get ahead of that. So, our focus is really, getting to where the puck is going to be before somebody else does and before we have to, and it's an emergency and the platform's burning.
Yeah, all those are great. I would say, to me, it comes down to one word, and that is collaboration. I think it's be very collaborative with the people that you're working through this journey with, whether that's external vendors, whether that's internal staff. It's got to be a collaborative effort to figure out what your journey needs to be. The second piece is, I've often say this at Benekiva. We were talking about this morning on the way over here. We look at collaboration as we're your partners. We're not a vendor. The moment we become a vendor, we've lost. And that's the time when you get in that vendor-client relationship, that's when you really need to step back and say, okay, let's get back to the drawing board. Let's get back to the collaboration table. Let's get this train back on its rails. Because as Steve mentioned earlier, no project is going to go 100% perfect. It's just not. We all know it, right? There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be zigs. There's going to be zags. And it's just about having that collaborative effort between all parties involved to say, this is the type of experience that these people deserve. That's where we're going. Now, how do we collaborate to get there?
Thank you. And I'll wrap up by sharing exactly what Steve said. Just start. Just start the process. Don't wait for that perfect plan to be there in place before you start your journey. So thank you so much to our panelists. So a round of applause for these amazing insights.